Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Welcome back to Spanish Lessons with Professor Jason. Nice to have you back. In today's lesson, I want to answer a question or address a question that I get all the time, and it deals with the placement of adjectives in Spanish. The question is, should adjectives come before, should they be placed before or after the nouns they modify in Spanish? And if so, what determines that? Now, most people have heard that adjectives in Spanish follow the nouns or come after nouns that they modify. But actually, the real answer is it depends. And one of the main factors upon which adjective placement depends has to do with the kind of adjective we're talking about. So let's take a look at 4 common types of adjectives in Spanish and how they relate to adjective placement. We'll be using the whiteboard and I'll give you plenty of examples. Here we go. Okay, so I just mentioned that we're going to look at 4 different types or categories of adjectives to frame our discussion of whether or not, right? So if here we have our noun, I'm going to represent this visually, whether or not the adjective goes before or after the noun. What we're going to see is with these first 3 types, numbers, demonstrative adjectives, and possessive adjectives, they are going to come before the noun. So let's take a look first at the numbers and give some examples of numbers acting as adjectives that precede nouns. First example, tengo 30 años. I am 30 years old. Number preceding the noun that it modifies. Compré, second example, compré 5 camisas. I purchased or bought 5 shirts. Very clear, right? That numbers as adjectives precede. Probably don't need any more examples, but let's do a couple more. Ella tomó or bebió 3 copas de vino. Number preceding the noun it modifies. And finally, we invited, invitamos, a, I'm going to write this one out, 300, so you can see that that's feminine and plural, personas. So this last example probably illustrates it the best because we can clearly see how numbers are adjectives, 300, agreeing in number and gender, that precede the nouns that they modify. So that takes care of the first category, numbers. Let's move on to the demonstratives. And just as a review, demonstratives are the equivalents for what in English would be this, these, that, and those, right? In other words, este, esta, estos, estas, ese, esa, esos. Let me see, is that right? And esas. Okay, just a quick review of what the demonstrative pronouns are. And again, these are going to precede. They're going to come before our noun. Let's take a look at 3 examples. No entiendo este, singular masculine, libro. Again, preceding the noun that it modifies. No entiendo este libro. Okay? Or voy a leerte esta, singular feminine, modifying carta, coming before. Finally, do you know that woman? ¿Conoces a esa mujer? So again, we can clearly see that not only do they obviously agree in number and gender, but they also are adjective forms that precede or come before the nouns that they modify. So again, that covers it for demonstratives. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The possessive adjectives, quick review, are the equivalents of my, your, his, her, right? What else? Our, their. In other words, me, or the plural, mis, tú, or tus, or if it's usted, or his or her, it's going to be su, or sus. Ours is going to be nuestro, and here we're going to have some variants, right, indicating number and gender. Same with in Spain, vuestro, vuestra, vuestros, vuestras. Or there, su, sus in the plural. Again, just a quick review of what those possessive adjectives actually are. And now our examples to show how they do come before the noun. Okay? Quick examples here. The old expression, mi casa es, right? Tu or su casa, right? So again, possessive adjectives preceding the nouns that they modify. I spoke to your parents yesterday. Hablé con tus, making it plural, tus padres ayer. Hablé con tus padres ayer. And then right out in front, our possessive adjective, nuestro, singular masculine, gato, singular masculine, preceding, se llama. Nuestro gato se llama Paco. So again, with the possessive adjectives, we can see that they do precede the nouns that they introduce. Mi casa, tu casa, tus padres, nuestro gato. Okay. Again, those first three categories are kind of obvious. We don't even always think of them as adjectives. Let's move on to the fourth type of adjective that we're going to look at, descriptive adjectives. Obviously, this is the category that gives us the most trouble. Lots of people know that descriptive adjectives usually follow the nouns. They usually follow nouns or come after nouns in Spanish. So let me give you some examples of typical usage, right? El presidente vive en la Casa Blanca. En la Casa Blanca. This comes after that, which is important for our illustration here. Juan compró una bicicleta barata, a cheap bicycle. Okay, again, here these descriptive adjectives are following the normal order. They're following the nouns that they modify. La profesora está leyendo un libro interesante. And finally, mi padre trabaja en una empresa, a company, colombiana. It's kind of unfortunate that these aren't really fitting on my screen because what I'm trying to emphasize is that these adjectives come after the nouns that they modify. So we're talking about Casa Blanca, bicicleta barata, libro interesante, empresa colombiana. The important thing to point out about what we might call the usual placement of descriptive adjectives in Spanish is that in examples like these, the function of the adjective, right, blanca, barato, interesante, colombiana, is to distinguish the nouns we're referring to others like them, other houses, other bicycles, other books, other companies, that could have different characteristics. So, when the function of an adjective is primarily differential, when it's used to distinguish a specific kind of noun from others like it that in theory could be different. There's other types of houses, other types of bikes, other types of books, other types of companies. That adjective is going to come after the noun, follow the noun. Which brings up the question we're trying to answer, right? When can descriptive adjectives be placed before the nouns they modify? So, when can descriptive adjectives come before the nouns, right? And we're still dealing with descriptive. We're going to look at basically three cases, three different types of exceptions. I guess this would be an exception to the normal rule that they would follow the nouns they modify. First is when, in examples like La Blanca Nieve, right? What's going on here? The adjective, which is descriptive, refers to a trait that is universally associated with or considered an inherent aspect. So that's going to be sort of our first exception. When the adjective sort of reiterates an inherent aspect, right, of the noun that it modifies. La blanca nieve, another example. Una oscura noche, right, preceding, or la bella princesa. So in these cases, adjectives like blanca, oscura, bella are just highlighting what are inherent or expected characteristics of snow, night, and princess. So that's the first case in which you often see descriptive adjectives preceding the nouns they modify. Second type of exception is what I would just call poetic license, right? Or this is done for literary or rhetorical effect, right? It's a non-standard usage that draws attention to itself or to the speaker or writer. So I'll give some examples. A poet might say, might refer to las fragancias, no, let's put the adjective first, it's kind of our point. Coloridas, colorful. Fragancias de la primavera. I'm not going to come up with a whole poem here, right? This is just my example. Coloridas fragancias. So for poetic, literary, rhetorical, stylistic effect, we're taking a descriptive adjective and placing it before the noun that it's trying to modify. Las coloridas fragancias de la primavera. Also an example of synesthesia. Okay. Or what about if a sportscaster, a sports announcer, was describing a game and he talked about el increíble gol que, right, increíble gol que marcó, it scored, right, González en el primer tiempo. El increíble gol, right, increíble gol. So again, using a little bit of poetic license to call attention to the language itself. A news reporter or analyst, I'm just making these up, right, might say something like el lamentable voto, right, the unfortunate, literally lamentable, the unfortunate vote del Congreso. So you might be describing some bill or something like that and refer to it as el lamentable voto del Congreso. In each of these cases, it's possible to put the descriptive adjective after the noun, but for poetic, rhetorical, literary, ego reasons, the person speaking or writing decided to put it out in front. Coloridas fragancias, increíble gol, lamentable voto. Okay. So again, getting back to the previous idea about when they follow, really the purpose of the adjective here is not to distinguish it so much from other types of goals as it is to highlight some often, what would be the word, subjective nature, right? Coloridas, increíble, lamentable. So I call that one poetic license. Let's look at one more type of exception to the rule that descriptive adjectives follow the nouns they modify. This one is going to be because certain adjectives have different meanings depending on whether they're placed before or after the nouns. I'm going to call this difference in meaning. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So some adjectives mean different things depending on their placement, right? So if it's placed before the noun, it means one thing. If it comes after the noun, it has a totally different meaning. Okay? Let's look at one word. We'll start off with grande, which is sometimes shortened to just gran, right? When it precedes singular masculine nouns. Okay? It can either mean great, right? The subjective judgment that somebody is great or something's great, fantastic, or it can mean large, right? Depending on whether it comes before or after the noun. So let's look at an example. El señor Velasco es un gran hombre. So when gran, shortened form of grande, comes before the noun, it means great. El señor Velasco is a great man. He's a great person. If it comes after, la señora Domínguez es una mujer grande, now it means something very different just because of the placement. So here we're following, right? When it follows, it means large. So here I'm saying he's a great man, and I'm saying she's a large woman, right? No intention of being sexist. Could just as easily be la señora Domínguez es una gran mujer, right? All right. Let's look at another word that behaves in this way. This word is antiguo. Antiguo, antigua, or whatever form we choose to use, right? It can either mean former when it comes out in front, or it can mean ancient, old. Okay, so I might say aprendí mucho de mi antiguo profesor, and I don't mean that he's old. I mean that he's my former professor, as opposed to me gusta estudiar la historia antigua. Kind of redundant, but la historia antigua, ancient history. So two different meanings of the word of forms of antiguo, right? Former professor, historia antigua, ancient or very old history. Got another example. How about the word pobre? Pobre, okay? When it comes before the noun that we're modifying, it means something like pitiful or miserable. When it comes after, it means poor, as in not much money. Okay? So if I say, ese pobre hombre, o esa pobre mujer, ese pobre hombre perdió su trabajo. De nuevo, lost his job again. Ese pobre hombre, when it comes before, we're expressing pity, right? Ese pobre hombre, that poor guy, just like we would say in English, right? That poor man lost his job again. However, if I use it after, it means something different, it means poor, right? No quiero que mi hija se case, subjunctive, con un hombre pobre. Coming after the noun, it modifies. No quiero que mi hija se case con un hombre pobre, a poor man, a man without financial means. All right, that concludes my presentation on adjective placement in Spanish. Hope you found it to be informative and useful. As always, I welcome your comments, questions, and suggestions. So if you do have a moment, please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this video lesson, okay? And if you liked this video, I hope you'll check out my other lessons on various topics in Portuguese and Spanish. As you know, you can find more Professor Jason content right here and at my website, professorjason.com. And you can even get updates if you like my Facebook community or follow me on Twitter. And I'll put that information up on Twitter, and I'll put that information up on the screen here in just a minute. So thanks again for watching. This has been Professor Jason, your guide to Spanish. See you at the next lesson. Hasta pronto. Ciao.